part of that work is also understanding a little bit about what happens in the brain when we're stressed or when we experience trauma. And Dan Siegel has a really great model of the hand brain concept called flipping your lid. And there's some further information about that on our website and an infographic on our website as well. But ultimately, he says, we know the brain develops from the bottom up and the inside out. And he says, if you look at the hand as a model of our brain that develops from the bottom up and the inside out, the base here would be our brain stem at a simplistic level. So the brain stem is involved in fight, flight, freeze responses, but it's also involved with a lot of the autonomic functions that we don't really have to think about. So Bessel van der Kolk calls this the housekeeping part of the brain. Then we have, so like breathing, heart rate, digestion, right? Blood pressure, all of these things that we don't have to think about doing. Our body just does it for us, which is actually pretty remarkable. We then have this kind of mid part of our brain. This is the next part of our brain to more fully grow and develop. And here we have things like our limbic system, which is our emotional regulatory boss, the amygdala, which is our personal security guard or threat detection center, the hippocampus, which is responsible for learning and memory, and essentially is like our own personal Google of the brain. It helps us to scan through memories and find the information that we're looking for. The older we are, the longer sometimes it can take. The less emotionally significant, the longer it can take. The stuff that's more emotionally charged tends to come up a little bit faster, or the stuff that we've revisited or thought about often. The last part of the brain to more fully grow and develop is the prefrontal part of the brain. So this part of our brain is like the wise leader or the higher order part of our brain that allows us to really reflect on things. It's our logic, our reason, our rationalization, cause and effect, executive functions. And this is a really wonderful part of our brain, but it's still growing and really goes into a peak period of growth and development in adolescence and into adulthood. So it's quite often our expectations of children and youth is not really on par with what we have available, right, neurologically. But Dan Siegel says what happens is when we have emotions that are big down here in the brainstem and in the midbrain, it causes us to flip our lid. And when we flip our lid, we lose access to logic, reason, rationalization, cause and effect, and all of those great strategies that we may have learned in therapy or other resources. And what happens is essentially that thinking part of our brain is largely going offline. So it may be difficult to talk. It may be difficult to reason, to explore cause and effect. What is going to get through in those moments when we flipped our lid, however, are sensory strategies. So our sights, sounds, smells, sensations of touch, nurturing movement. Again, we're working with the senses and the movement and the emotions to try and shift that affective state, bring the arousal down, and then we're able to engage that higher order, more logical, rational part of the brain.